By this point, we have a custom layout for each of the items that will feed into our to-do list. This is just specified in our to-do item layout, or whatever you've called your file. In my case, like I showed you, I just have a couple of text views, nothing too complicated. If you have extra data, such as maybe images or buttons, you want some extra functionality, then yours might look a little different. Just take note of the fact that I've stored mine within an encasing constraint layout. If you actually just have text that you want to display, like you just have a name, you can actually just use a text view and don't even need it in the constraint layout. But nevertheless, just take note that this is going to be the view that each of the items will feed into our recycle view will take on, okay? Now, the next step to this is going to be creating a custom adapter for this recycler view that is going to basically create a view like this for each of the items, bind data to each of those views, and then populate our recycle view with a bunch of those views. So that's what our adapter is going to do. We'll create it in a new file here. Let's just go for a new Kotlin file/class. I'm putting it in the same package as the activities, by the way. So let's create a class, and let's just call this something like to-do items adapter. You can call it what you like, but it should have adapter in the name, as that's what we're going to be subclassing. So our to-do items adapter is going to be a subclass of an existing recycler view adapter class. The recycler view adapter provides a very base, bare bones implementation, so we'd like something a little more custom, hence our subclass that we're creating here. We do, however, need to specify that it's going to be a subclass of a recycler view dot adapter. So in these angular brackets, we're going to pass in the to-do items adapter, and we're going to take in a view holder. So we actually don't have a view holder class implemented now. We'll have to create that, and we'll have to implement a few methods to help us to create the views, so inflate these layouts, and also bind the data. Now before we implement those, we should actually pass something into our constructor that is going to take into account the data that we're passing in. We're going to start off with just a list of strings, because we'll just focus on the names for now. Later on, however, we'll probably create a custom class for to-do items and then pass in a bunch of to-do item objects. So let's just create a private val to-do items list. Okay, and this is going to be of type array list of strings. Like I said, we'll implement a custom object later, but let's stick with this for now. So we're going to need, again, that custom view holder class, which we'll create in just a second. And then there's going to be a few more methods, hence the error here, that will help us again to create the views and then bind the data. So let's create that class now. Just bear with me while I create this, and then I'll explain exactly what's going on. So this is going to be a view holder. It's going to take in a constraint layout in my case, but if you chose a different root layout, then you'll want to pass that in. So if you used a linear layout, just replace my constraint layout with a linear layout. If you just use a text view, so you didn't even have an encasing layout, then just pass in the text view. This is basically just going to take in some kind of a view. So I'm going to call mine constraint layout because that's exactly what it is. And we're going to again subclass a recycler view dot view holder class. This is going to take in some kind of a view so that we can bind the data. And this, in my case, is just going to be my constraint layout that I'm creating here. Okay, so again, this view holder class is going to be used to create a custom view that is based on a constraint layout, and then it's just going to call my superclass for that. Okay, so it's a way to create a view based on this to-do item layout here. So like I said, there's three more methods we'll need. One is going to be on create view holder. Okay. One is going to be on bind view holder. And the third is going to be get item count. And this is perhaps the simplest. So starting from the top, working downwards, on create view holder is just going to be called as soon as we create a new instance of a view holder. So we can kind of think about this method as being like the on create in a main activity class, or in our add item activity for that matter. It's just a way to provide any extra setup that we need to do as soon as a view is created. So in our case, this might be specifying any on-click listeners if we want some extra functionality. Maybe we'll want to change the color of some items, and so on and so forth. This is just a way to specify any other appearance attributes or functionality attributes that we want to bind as soon as a view is created. So it'll be a fairly simple implementation to start off with. We'll probably make it more complex as we go. Our onBind view holder is going to be used to actually bind the data that we find in our to-do items list here to each of the views so that we can create a custom view for each of the items in our list. And then the getItemCount is simply returning how many items are in our list here. In fact, we can implement that now. We're just simply going to return our to-do items list dot size. So fairly straightforward there. So let's first focus on our onCreateViewHolder implementation. We'll first want to get an instance of our constraint layout, and we're going to get that by basically using a layout inflator to inflate this guy here. And that will give us access to this constraint layout and everything within it. So let's create a val. I'm going to call mine a constraint layout because that's, again, exactly what it is. This is going to be a call to a layout inflator. We're going to have to inflate something from a certain context. This is going to be the parent's context, so parent.context. And then we're going to call upon an inflate method. We're going to need to pass in a layout ID, so a resource. We're going to need to pass in a root view group. In this case, it's probably just going to be parent, and then attached to root will probably set to false. So that resource is just going to be r.layout.todo item layout, or whatever you called your custom view. We're going to again pass in the parent, and then we're going to pass in false. And I just want to put this to a new line. We're going to have to cast this, in my case at least, as a constraint layout. If yours was just say a text view, then you'll want to cast it as a text view. Just make sure you're inflating a layout file, and that's going to be your custom layout file. So from here, I could access each of the items within here. I could access text view 0 and text view 1. By calling upon this method, constraint layout.getChild at, and then passing in the index of that child. I'm not going to do this just yet. I'll actually call upon that method a little later. For now, again, we're keeping things super simple. So from here, all we'll need to do is actually return a call to viewHolder, and we'll need to pass in this constraint layout that we just inflated. So again, this is just to perform some very preliminary setup. We don't need to do any setup just yet, however, so we'll leave this as is. Now the onBind view holder, like I said, is where we're going to actually take the data found in our to-do items list and then bind it to each of these views. So note how it takes in a holder of type view holder and a position. So this is just going to be the position of each of the items in our list, and then we're just going to have to specify what we want to do with each of the view holders at that position. In our case, we're just going to get the layout that we passed into a view holder. So we'll call upon holder dot, in my case, constraint layout, or whatever you called the variable you passed in here. And we're just going to, I'll store this in a variable or a val in my case called constraint layout. Okay, this is going to be equal to this. I'm going to have to, again, get that child at this certain index. So in my case, I'm just going to get the first text view. I'm not going to worry about the second one just yet. So we'll call this one a name text view. This is going to be equal to my constraint layout, which I just created, and we're going to get the child at a certain index. That index is just going to be the very first one, as this is the very first text view. Okay, and then I'm going to take the text found at the certain position specified here and bind it to that name text view. So I'm just going to say name text view dot set text, or in this case actually it's just text, is going to be equal to, oh, and by the way, I do have to cast this as a text view, which is why that option is not coming up. So we'll say name text view dot text is going to be equal to my, what did we call it, to-do items list at the certain position. Okay, and that is all we need to do here. So that's actually all we need for this very simple version of the custom implementation. I know it can be a little confusing if you're not used to using adapters, but again, it's essentially just a way to create a custom view for each of the items in the list, bind the data to each of those custom views, in this case just returning the count, and then we're just going to create a new adapter and set it in our main activity. Okay, so that's really all this is doing, is just creating custom view, binding the data, and then we're going to use that to populate our list. So we can give this a save now. We're actually done with this for now, but we will revisit it. And let's head on over to main activity. So we'll have to create a new adapter and also what's called a view manager that will be used to specify how items are going to be laid out in our view, or rather in our recycler view. So let's create a couple of variables to represent those now. We'll create first one for the adapter. So it'll be a private late init variable. Let's call this something like recycler adapter. And this is really nice. It actually automatically comes up with that suggestion there. And we'll also again create that view manager. So private late init variable. We'll call this recycler whoops, really having trouble typing. Recycler view manager. Which is going to be not of type security manager, but we want it to be of type recyclerView.layout manager. So, you know what? Maybe recycler layout manager might be a better name. So let's call it that, recycler layout manager, which is going to be of type recyclerView.layout manager. Okay, good stuff. Now these are both late init variables, so we'll have to initialize them in onCreate, and that's also where we're going to bind the data by setting our adapter for this recycler view. So let's actually first set up our layout manager, just because that's just the one line of code. We'll set our recycler layout manager equal to a new instance of a linear layout manager, because there are a few options we can choose from. One is a grid layout, one is a linear layout. We just want the simple kind of top to bottom linear layout, nothing fancy. We're going to have to pass in some kind of context. That is just going to be this, and we should be good to go there. By the way, it did add that import, which is why everything is shifted down. We'll also initialize our recycler adapter, so recycler adapter, and this is going to be equal to a new instance of our to-do items adapter. We'll need to pass in some kind of an array list of strings. We actually don't have one set up right now, so let's create an array list to represent this. So we'll create a variable, let's call this to-do items list, which is going to be, actually let's initialize it up here, and then we'll populate it with some values in onCreate. So this is going to be an array list of strings for now. Okay, and we'll just initialize this to be empty, and then in onCreate we'll populate it with some values in just a second here. So we'll pass in that array list to do items list, and that will set up our recycler adapter, but we've only set it up, we haven't actually bound it to our recycler view. So we need to perform a little bit of extra setup as well, so we'll call on our to-do items recycler view, and we're going to call on an apply statement so that we can apply multiple items or multiple things to it. So in our case, we're going to set has fixed size equal to true. Okay, this is kind of the same as calling to-do items recycler view dot set has fixed size, so on and so forth. We'll also set the recycler items recycler view dot layout manager equal to this linear layout manager which we just created. And we'll also set the adapter equal to our custom recycler adapter. Okay, so we're almost ready to begin testing this. We of course do need some data to populate, otherwise we're not really going to see anything. So let's just create some dummy items for now. And we're just going to take our to-do items list, and we're going to add some elements. Let's just add, maybe we'll want to buy groceries. Buy groceries. We'll also want to maybe do the laundry. Okay, and maybe we'll want to play guitar or something. I don't know. So just populate a few items just so that we have a few test items to work with. So we'll give this a save, and we're actually ready to begin running this. So make sure you have a simulator started up, or an emulator, whichever word you'd prefer. Go ahead and select that. And let's see if this is working. So while this builds up, let's review what we've covered so far. So we started by implementing our to-do items adapter. This was just a way to basically take in some items, in our case just an array of strings for now, which will change. And it's going to be a way to create a custom view for each of those items, bind the data to each of those custom views, and then we're going to use that to populate our list, or our recycler view, I should say. In our main activity, we created a recycler adapter and a layout manager to help us determine how things are going to be laid out. The recycler adapter itself is again an instance of this and is just going to be used to bind data to the certain views. We set everything up in onCreate so that as soon as this app loads up, it's going to, well, first of all populate our list with some items. It's then going to specify that we want a linear layout, so just kind of top to bottom. And then we're going to use our adapter to bind this data to a bunch of custom views of to-do item layout type, and then attach it to our recycler view. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on here. And again, I wanted to walk you through this whole process because it's really it's not 100% intuitive if you have never done something like this before. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the warning. Once this is done, we can discuss some improvements that we can perform, and then you can kind of try to make some of these improvements yourself. So let's see, this is showing up. So it's looking pretty good so far. I mean, with the exception of this item urgency, if we don't really want these eventually, we'll change that in a bit. But as you can see, it's populated my list with these 3 items. So we can buy groceries, we can do laundry, we can play guitar, and that's just whatever we have up here. So I won't assign any homework or anything at the end of this section. We'll do a lot more stuff in the next section, so that will involve, for starters, building up a custom class to represent a to-do item. So I guess all I want you to do for now is think about what kind of stuff like fields, what kind of properties and state a to-do item might have, as well as what kind of behaviors and methods, so basically how that to-do item class is going to look. I want you to kind of review the stuff that we covered in this adapter, see how we can make it more customizable. Obviously, try to customize this adapter to how your views look, as they might look a little different from mine. And also give a look, if you don't already know how to do this, into attaching on-click listeners. So the way I want to set this up is in my overall list, I want to be able to click on an item to view it and maybe edit/delete it. So in my case, this might involve clicking on the item and taking me to a new page entirely, so creating a new page, or we could actually take us just to the add item activity. We could have some of the fields filled out, and it will give us the ability to modify an item. So just think about how we might do that. Obviously, I'll get you started in the next section, kind of show you a solution just like I've been doing in the previous few sections. But mostly, I just want you to be comfortable with this stuff before we move on to the previous sections, as I want you to start with a solid foundation.